Emma knelt in her garden, the sun warming her shoulders as she trimmed the roses she had planted years ago. Gardening was her safe place, the one corner of life where she felt calm and in control. The world slowed down among the rows of flowers, and she often lost track of time. That afternoon, the air was quiet, only broken by the soft snip of scissors and the hum of distant cars. She bent forward to gather a fallen petal when she suddenly sensed something shadows shifting on the ground. Footsteps to close. Her hand froze midair, and her heart gave a sharp jolt. Turning slowly, she saw him. James, her neighbor from 2 houses down, stood at the edge of her yard. His tall frame was outlined by the sunlight, his hands tucked awkwardly in his pockets as if he hadn't planned what he would say. Emma's pulse raced, not because he was dangerous, but because his sudden nearness felt strangely intense. They'd spoken before, but only about ordinary things, weather, mail delivery, the way autumn came too quickly. Nothing in those short exchanges had prepared her for the weight of silence that now stretched between them. "Sorry," James said finally, his voice breaking through the air. "I didn't mean to scare you. You looked busy." He tried to smile, but his eyes told a different story. Emma nodded, brushing soil from her hands, trying to steady herself. "You surprised me," she admitted, her voice softer than she intended. She wanted to sound casual, but her chest still felt tight. James stepped closer, not too near, but close enough that she caught the faint scent of cedar and soap. His gaze moved over the flowers, then back to her face. "I was walking and saw you out here. Thought I'd say hello?" The words were simple, yet something lingered beneath them, something unspoken. Emma noticed the way his shoulders tensed, like he wasn't here just for small talk. She forced a smile, trying to keep the moment light. "Well, hello," she said, bending again toward her roses. But her hands fumbled with the stems, her calm broken by his presence. James didn't leave. Instead, he studied the garden as if searching for the right words. The silence between them wasn't empty, it was full of questions, of things Emma wasn't sure she wanted to answer. He finally picked a stray petal from the ground, turning it between his fingers. "You take care of this place really well," he said. "It looks alive here." Emma glanced up, caught off guard by the softness in his tone. Compliments about her garden weren't new neighbors often admired, but the way James said it felt different, though he wasn't just talking about flowers. She felt her heartbeat rise again, quick and uncertain. Her thoughts shifted to Mark, her husband, who was away on another long trip. He had been gone for weeks, sending short texts and quick calls at odd hours. Their conversations felt rehearsed, like two people keeping up appearances rather than sharing real moments. Emma never admitted it out loud, but she had grown used to silence, filling it with her work and the rhythm of gardening. Now, James's presence unsettled that silence, and she didn't know whether to welcome it or fear it. She straightened, meeting his gaze directly. His eyes held hers for a second longer than they should have, and Emma felt the air thicken between them. She wanted to step back to break the moment before it grew into something heavier, but her feet stayed still. He didn't speak again, and neither did she, both caught in an invisible thread they hadn't chosen but couldn't ignore. Emma's mind spun with questions. Why had he come here? Why now? They were neighbors, not friends. And yet, standing there in the soft glow of the afternoon, it felt as though something had shifted, like a door had opened without her realizing it. The sound of a car passing on the street broke the spell, and Emma blinked, realizing she had been staring at him too long. She looked back at the roses, her voice quiet but steady. "I should finish up before it gets dark," she said, hoping to end the moment. But James only nodded, his expression unreadable. He stepped back slowly, the petals still in his hand, and gave her one last look before turning away. Emma watched him leave, her chest heavy with confusion. Nothing had happened. No words of confession, no touch, no clear reason for her unease. And yet everything felt different now. The garden, once her place of peace, carried a new weight. His sudden visit had stirred something she wasn't ready to name. She bent down again, forcing herself to focus on the roses. But her thoughts kept circling back to his eyes, his voice. The way her breath had caught when she first turned and saw him there. For the first time in years, Emma realized she wasn't alone in her quiet world. Someone had stepped into it, uninvited, unexpected. And she couldn't shake the feeling that this was only the beginning. Emma's garden no longer felt the same after that day. She tried to carry on as usual, trimming the roses, watering the soil, arranging the pots by the fence, but her mind was restless. James's sudden appearance had unsettled something deep inside her. She told herself it was just a neighborly visit, nothing more, but the memory of his steady gaze stayed with her. It wasn't what he said that bothered her, it was what he didn't say. There was weight behind his words, and Emma couldn't shake the feeling that he had come for a reason he hadn't shared. 2 evenings later, she saw him again. She was kneeling by the hydrangeas when his shadow appeared across the fence. Her body tensed, but she didn't freeze this time. She stood, brushing dirt from her knees, and faced him. He leaned casually against the wooden panels, but there was tension in the way he held himself. "You don't usually walk this way," she said, her tone careful. He gave a small shrug. "I don't, but tonight I wanted to." His honesty came quickly, without excuses, and it caught her off guard. Emma wasn't sure how to respond, so she bent to pick up the watering can, giving her hands something to do. The silence between them stretched, filled with the sound of water splashing over the soil. James broke it first. "Your garden, it's different than the others around here. It feels alive, like it belongs to you." His words came out softer than before, thoughtful, almost admiring. Emma glanced up, meeting his eyes for a brief second before looking away. Compliments weren't new to her, but the tone in his voice carried more weight than simple praise. "It's the one place I can breathe," she admitted quietly, not sure why she said it out loud. She rarely opened up to anyone, not even to Mark anymore. Her husband had been away for weeks, again traveling from city to city. His presence reduced to late-night phone calls filled with exhaustion and distraction. She missed the closeness they once had, but over the years it had faded into routine. The garden had become her comfort, the place where she could let her heart rest. And now here was James, standing at her fence, noticing things she thought no one noticed. He studied her for a moment, as if her words meant more to him than she intended. The silence pressed in again, heavier this time. Emma felt a strange pull to fill it, but she didn't know what to say. Part of her wanted him to leave, to give her back the quiet she depended on. But another part of her didn't mind the interruption. Finally, she asked, "Why are you really here, James?" The question slipped out before she could stop herself. His shoulders stiffened. He looked down at the grass, turning a small twig in his hand. "I don't know if I should say," he admitted, "but I wanted to." Emma's chest tightened. His words were simple, but she felt the weight behind them. She took a step back, unsure of what she was inviting by asking. James lifted his eyes, and for a moment she saw something raw, something that made her breath catch. The air between them grew heavy, charged with emotions neither of them had spoken aloud. Emma felt torn. She wanted to guard herself, to draw a line. But his presence stirred feelings she hadn't allowed herself to feel in years. She remembered the way Mark used to look at her when they first married, with warmth and curiosity, as though she was the only person in the room. Somewhere along the way, that look had disappeared. James's gaze carried some of that same intensity, and it unsettled her because it reminded her of what she had lost. She set down the watering can and folded her arms as if that might shield her from the moment. "James," she said softly, "neighbors usually talk about the weather or the mailbox. Not this." He gave a small smile, but it didn't reach his eyes. "Maybe I'm not very good at small talk." Her lips curved slightly despite herself. She didn't want to laugh, but his honesty made it impossible to ignore. Still, she stayed guarded. This wasn't safe. She knew it, and yet she couldn't bring herself to push him away completely. The wind shifted, carrying the scent of roses around them. Emma felt her heart beat faster, the silence wrapping around them like an invisible thread. She tried to steady her voice. "It's late. I should finish up before it gets dark." James nodded slowly, but he didn't move right away. His eyes lingered, full of thoughts he didn't speak. When he finally stepped back, Emma felt both relief and disappointment. She watched him walk away, his figure fading into the twilight, and she realized something had changed. He hadn't confessed anything, hadn't crossed a line, but the tension between them was undeniable. She stayed in the garden long after he left, kneeling by the roses, though her hands hardly moved. The air was cooler now, but her chest was warm with restless thoughts. Why had she asked him why he came? Why did it matter to her? Emma knew she was walking close to a line she never thought she'd approach. Days passed, and Emma found herself thinking about James more often than she wanted to admit. Every time she stepped into the garden, she half expected to see him leaning against the fence, watching quietly as she worked. It became a private tension, a quiet pull she couldn't shake. She tried to focus on her routines, watering, pruning, arranging, but her mind wandered back to his words, his gaze, the way he had spoken so openly. It was confusing. She loved her life, she loved her home, and she loved the stability she had built. Yet in those stolen moments with James, felt something stirring that she hadn't felt in years, unexpected excitement. A longing she hadn't acknowledged before. One evening, as the sky painted itself in shades of orange and pink, Emma was kneeling among her roses when she sensed movement at the edge of the yard. She didn't look up immediately, afraid that her pulse would betray her. But then he was there. James leaning casually on the fence, but this time closer, bolder. Emma's breath caught in her throat. His presence always did that, quiet, deliberate, and somehow magnetic. "Emma," he said softly, almost hesitant. "I hope I'm not intruding again." "You're just walking by," she asked, trying to mask the quickening of her heart with a casual tone. He shook his head. "No, I wanted to stop. I needed to see you." His words were careful, deliberate, but the sincerity in his voice made her heart race. She looked down, tugging at the edge of her gloves, pretending to adjust her gardening, but every nerve in her body was alert. For a long moment, neither spoke. The garden felt smaller, more intimate, as if the flowers themselves were holding their breath. Emma's thoughts spiraled. She had a husband, Mark, but he had been gone for weeks, again. And their calls were brief, filled with polite check-ins rather than the warmth they once shared. She hadn't realized how lonely she had felt until this moment, standing in the soil and sunlight. Someone paying her full attention, someone who truly noticed her. James finally broke the silence. "I notice you," he said quietly, almost as if confessing a secret. "I notice how careful you are, how much you put into this, and I notice you." Emma froze, her hands gripping the edge of a flower pot. She felt the words sink in like stones in her chest. Her mind raced with questions and warnings. This wasn't safe. She was married, and yet her heart was reacting before her reason could catch up. She wanted to step back to remind herself of boundaries, but the pull she felt toward him made her feet heavy, rooted to the spot. James," she began, her voice wavering. It isn't simple." "I know," he whispered, leaning slightly forward, his gaze intense but gentle. "I'm not asking for anything reckless. I just needed to tell you." His words were honest, without expectation, and yet the effect they had on her was undeniable. Emma's chest tightened, a mixture of fear, longing, and something unnameable stirring inside her. For a few moments, they stood in silence. The roses around them swayed gently in the evening breeze, and the soft sound of distant traffic seemed to fade away. Emma's mind was a whirlwind of memories and emotions. She remembered how Mark used to watch her when they were first married. The warmth in his eyes, the curiosity, the laughter. Somehow that warmth had dimmed over the years, replaced with routines and obligations. And now James's quiet attentiveness reminded her of what she had been missing. What she had perhaps allowed herself to forget. "I can't deny. I felt this too," she admitted softly, her eyes dropping to the flowers beneath her fingers. She didn't look at him directly, afraid of what she might see in his expression, afraid of how much she might feel. Her voice was barely above a whisper, but the weight of her confession hung in the air, heavier than any words she had spoken in years. James reached out, not to touch her, but to gently lift a stray petal from a rose and hold it between his fingers, offering it to her as if it carried the sincerity of his heart. "I'm not here to complicate your life," he said quietly. I just, I want you to know that I see you, Emma, that I've noticed you for a long time." Her breath caught. The simple act of noticing, of being fully seen, was more powerful than she could have anticipated. She felt warmth spread across her chest and at the same time a pang of guilt. She had a life, a marriage, responsibilities. Yet here was someone who made her feel alive in a way she hadn't allowed herself in years. They talked then, quietly, carefully, each word measured, each glance filled with meaning. He didn't rush her, didn't demand anything. He simply shared himself, and in return, she shared a part of herself that had been silent for too long. Their conversation drifted from flowers to memories, to simple moments in their lives, to dreams that felt distant yet reachable. The tension between them was palpable, but it was not destructive. It was electric, filled with possibility and understanding. When the evening grew darker, Emma realized that she didn't want him to leave, though she knew the conversation couldn't go further. "I should finish up before it's too late," she said softly, gathering her gloves and tools. She didn't want to break the spell, but the garden, for all its intimacy, had boundaries that needed respect. James nodded, taking a step back. "I'll go," he said quietly, "but thank you for letting me stay, for letting me speak, for letting me see you." His words lingered as he turned toward the fence, his figure moving away slowly, deliberately, giving her space, yet leaving a presence that was impossible to ignore. As she closed the gate behind him, Emma's heart was a mixture of emotions, longing, excitement, fear, and guilt. She knew she had crossed an invisible line by allowing herself to feel this way, by admitting a connection that shouldn't exist. Yet at the same time, she couldn't deny the power of being truly noticed, of being understood without expectation or judgment. That night, as she lay awake in her quiet house, she replayed the conversation again and again. The soft intensity of James's voice, the honesty in his gaze, the careful respect he had shown it all lingered in her mind. She realized that what they shared, even in brief moments, had awakened a part of her heart that she had kept locked for too long. And though the path ahead was unclear, and though the life she had built was complex, Kama knew that something had shifted in her. Her garden, once a sanctuary of solitude and quiet routine, had become a space of possibility, of emotions she hadn't allowed herself to feel. She understood now that her heart had room for more than she had imagined, and that the arrival of James had changed something fundamental. The tension, the longing, the careful honesty between them, it was a beginning, fragile yet undeniable. And Emma realized that she would have to face the choices that this new awareness brought, whether she was ready or not. The days that followed were filled with small, stolen moments, brief glances, quiet smiles from across fences, shared silences that spoke louder than words. Every encounter deepened the bond she felt, every look and gesture filling the spaces in her heart that had been empty for far too long. And though she tried to maintain her routines to protect the life she had built, she could no longer deny the effect James had on her. The quiet stirrings of the heart that would not be ignored. Emma knew she was standing on the edge of something important, something dangerous yet beautiful. And as she returned to her flowers each day, she realized that this was only the beginning of a story that had already begun to write itself. Quietly, tenderly, and irrevocably. Emma had spent the week replaying every moment with James in her mind. Each glance, each word, each quiet pause lingered like a gentle echo she couldn't shake. Her garden, once a place of peace and solitude, now held a strange tension, a charge that made her heart race when she stepped among the roses and hydrangeas. She tried to focus on her work trimming branches, removing old petals and watering carefully, but every sound, every shadow made her glance toward the fence, half expecting him to appear. One evening, as the sun dipped low, painting the sky in gold and violet, Emma found herself kneeling near the tulips, her hands in the soil, her thoughts elsewhere. She sensed the familiar presence before she even looked up. Footsteps, soft and deliberate, approached from the garden path. Her chest tightened, her heart pounding, and she didn't need to turn. She already knew who it was. James. He stepped into the garden quietly, careful not to startle her, but the intensity of his gaze was impossible to ignore. "Emma," he said softly, his voice breaking the evening's quiet, "I shouldn't be here. I know that. But I couldn't stay away." Emma closed her eyes for a moment, taking in the sincerity, the raw emotion in his words. Her hands were still, the soil clinging to her fingers. She had a life, responsibilities, and a husband, Mark, who had been away on yet another trip. Her vows were real. Her home was filled with memories, and yet here was someone who had quietly entered her heart and stirred emotions she had thought were buried. When she opened her eyes, their gazes met, heavy with everything left unsaid over the past week. Her breath caught, her mind spinning with the complexity of what she felt. She had always considered herself grounded, careful, and rational, but the pull toward James was undeniable. It was gentle, not reckless, but persistent, like a breeze brushing through the garden and tugging at the petals of her heart. "I know this is dangerous." "Shh," she whispered, her voice barely audible. "I can't just let this happen." James nodded slowly, understanding the weight of her words. "I know," he replied, his tone soft, almost reverent. "I won't push. I just needed you to know. You've changed something in me, Emma, something I can't ignore." The evening air felt heavier, charged with longing and unspoken possibilities. Emma felt the conflict inside her, a swirl of loyalty, desire, fear, and hope. She wanted to tell him to leave to maintain the life she had built, but her heart wouldn't let her. Something about the way he looked at her, the careful honesty in his eyes, made her feel alive in a way she hadn't for years. James took a cautious step closer, not to invade her space, but to bridge the invisible distance between them. "I won't ask for more than you can give," he said softly. "I just need you to hear me. I needed to tell you that you've touched my life in a way I can't explain." Emma's chest tightened. The truth was, she had felt it too. The quiet moments, the shared silences. The way he noticed her so full yet had awakened something she had tried to suppress for too long. She had always thought love was simple, or at least predictable. But with James, everything felt new, uncertain and urgent. She stood slowly, brushing soil from her knees, her heart pounding. "James, I don't know what to say," she admitted, her voice trembling. She wanted to speak, to confess the depth of what she felt, but the fear of crossing a line held her back. Her life was complicated, and yet the emotions inside her were impossible to ignore. He didn't speak immediately. Instead, he reached down, picking a single rose petal that had fallen from one of her plants, holding it gently between his fingers. "Then don't say anything," he whispered. "Just know that I feel it too, and that I respect whatever you decide." The gesture was small, yet it carried more weight than words. Emma felt tears prick at her eyes, not of sadness, but of relief and longing, of emotions that had been pent up for too long. She realized that what they shared in those brief moments wasn't about reckless attraction or impulsive feelings. It was about recognition, understanding, and honesty. They had both opened a door quietly, carefully, and now they had to decide what to do with what lay beyond. The sun disappeared behind the horizon, leaving the garden bathed in the soft glow of twilight. Emma felt the cool air on her skin, and yet the warmth of their connection lingered, wrapping around her like a gentle embrace. She knew that the choice wasn't just about him, it was about herself, about her desires, her fears, and the part of her heart that had long been dormant. "I need time," she said finally, her voice firm yet tender. "Time to think, to understand what this means." James nodded, his expression a mixture of hope and restraint. "Take all the time you need. I'll respect it." He took a careful step back, giving her space, yet not leaving entirely. His presence still filled the garden, like a quiet promise hovering between them. Emma watched him for a long moment, feeling the weight of the decision pressing on her heart. She wanted clarity, but she also understood that feelings couldn't be rushed. The gentle tension, the quiet longing, the sense that something significant had begun, all of it lingered in the garden, as real and fragile as the flowers around them. Finally, James turned toward the fence, pausing to look back one last time. Emma felt a pang in her chest as he walked away, fading into the shadows of the evening. She closed the garden gate slowly, the click echoing in the quiet night. Inside the house was still, but her heart was not. The moments with James had shifted something inside her, awakened emotions she couldn't ignore, and reminded her that life was rarely simple or predictable. As she sat by the window later, watching the stars emerge, Emma realized that she had reached a turning point. Her garden, once a haven of solitude, had become a place of emotional awakening, of longing and possibility. She didn't know what would come next, or how her heart would navigate the choices ahead. But she felt alive in a way she hadn't for years. The connection with James had opened a door she wasn't sure she was ready to walk through. Yet she couldn't deny the pull. And as the night deepened, Emma knew one thing clearly. Her heart had changed. Something beautiful, delicate, and uncertain had begun, and it was up to her to decide whether to let it grow. The garden held the memory of their moments together, and she understood that the future, whatever it held, would be shaped by the courage to face her own feelings and the honesty to recognize the impact someone could have, quietly, profoundly, on her life.